Sorry, y'all, we're kind of late. Let me send this to Becky. Haven't been on live in a minute. Oh, Becky, let me send it to your other one. My bad, I sent it to Standby Survivors. Hi, everyone. We're just getting logged in. How's your guys' day going? My bad. Y'all, I don't normally start these. Becky, my phone in emergency mode while trying to adjust my volume. So, my bad for pausing that for a moment.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, when you came up, when you started, I clicked it and it was my other account. Like I was already in Standby Survivors and then it switched and it got off.
I was like, wait, I requested that one. Because we haven't talked before jumping on, I'm just time if we go a little bit over.
Okay.
Just so but yeah. Hello everyone. Sorry we started a little bit late, but Becky, you're always good with the openings.
Yeah. No, we it's been interesting. We had a couple of things happen these last few weeks that were like, we need to come on a live and we need to talk about it because it's been in relationship to Preston, like we've been talking about, but also just in the parenting world. Some of it's been in connection to, some of it's been other things, just kind of talking about like how do we do parenting better. And so I think like one of the big things I wanted to come on and talk about was something that happened with Connor. I know it's still happening right now, but it was last week before. Yes, they do need to arrest those kids. They're working on it slowly but surely. And so Connor is in 8th grade and he's my kid who like every single day will tell me he doesn't want to go to school. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't have a choice. Like, shut up and go to school. Even at the beginning of a break, like he'll have a 2-week break and he'll say, oh, I don't want to go to school. And I'm like, you don't have to go to school for 2 weeks. What is your issue? So this is kind of always just what his thing is. But last week it was all of a sudden, like most nights as we're getting ready to do our devotionals together as a family, he would say, oh, I don't feel good. I have to go to the bathroom. And it's like, well, okay, what's going on? And so I asked him, I think maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, I said, are you all right? Like, what's going on? He said, yeah, I just have stomach ache. We need to fix what we're eating or something. And so I was like, okay, well, nobody else has any issues. So, and Ryan said his stomach was bugging him a little bit, but no big deal. Well, then it happened again, like 2 more nights and at the exact time. So it wasn't like, oh, I've been sick all day and then I came home and I was sick. It was like at 9:15 when all of a sudden it's time to go to bed. He doesn't feel good. And so,
was he more anxious?
Yeah. And so on it would have been Thursday night, I finally said to him, like, all right, what is going on? Because I can tell that something is going on. And he had mentioned here or there, like, because he's just seeming really off and nervous about stuff, and like even more nervous than just, oh, I don't want to go to school, in the sense of like, I think it's boring and I don't want to be there. And so I finally got out of him that 2 of his friends, like these 2 kids that they were friends with each other this whole like previous semester, when they came back to school, all of a sudden these 2 boys are like bullying and calling names and like grabbing him around his neck and pulling on his backpack. And so I always talk to the boys. Connor is 13. So I always talk to the boys about, if you don't like what your friends are doing, you need to go do something different, because if they're going to get in trouble, you're going down with them, whether you did whatever their thing is or not. So we always have that conversation of just move yourself, get yourself out of that area, um, figure out a different space. And like I said, he was friends with these boys. So it's not like all of a sudden they're coming up and picking on him. They were friends. They sat together at lunch. They had most classes together. And so he didn't really know how to handle the situation. So what he did, him and one of his friends switched tables at lunch so that they weren't sitting next to them. And then it just so happened that it rained really heavy, and the table they moved to, you couldn't get to because it was in the grass. So then they had to go find something else. And so they never got this reprieve from these two boys. And so finally I asked him, and I was like, what is going on? And he told me, and I said, like, buddy, I have to message your teachers. I have to as a group, at least the ones that you guys all have classes together, I at least need to let them know not to put you with them for projects or sit you next to each other, at least until this settles down, because it's just going to keep getting worse. And the problem he found himself in is he's friends with these kids. He can either say something and make it worse because they'll be like, oh, you're such a baby and blah, 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 blah. Or you find yourself getting in trouble with them because they're being jerks and you don't want to deal with that. And so finally, and you could just tell it's like this anxiety building up in him. Like, how do I deal with this? Or what do I do? And so I emailed all of the teachers Thursday night and just said, these two kids are causing problems. This is what Connor said. He's not the only kid that's having issues. If you could at least look into it, figure out what's happening. So the next morning I get an email from one of the teachers that really likes Connor. Him and her just click really well. And she goes, I knew something was going on. She goes, I asked him on Wednesday if he was okay. And all he said was, oh, I'm tired. She goes, but I knew something was happening. And so she ended up giving me a call and said, I talked to all of the other teachers because they have like teacher teams. So there's like 4 of them that teach the group of 150 kids out of the 8th grade class. And she said all of the other teachers were wondering what was wrong with him and a couple other boys because they all started to get really anxious and not really know what's going on and not figuring out and they just couldn't figure out. They weren't telling them what happened. And so she goes, tell Connor how proud I am for coming to you and telling you, and thank you for telling us, because if we don't hear it, we don't know. And so she said, if they went and they talked to the 2 boys, she said, if it's still happening, let me know. Just have him come up to me and say it's still happening, and then we'll figure it out from there. And so I told her, I said, thank you guys so much. I said, I do not need another Gilbert Goons situation coming out. And they're very much aware of it too. And they're like, nope, everything we see, we are putting a stop to. We are not dealing with this. And again, like my thought was, how many times on social media do you get that the teachers aren't going to do anything, or the teachers aren't wanting to be there or whatever? I don't know how true that really is, or if that's just the message that they're trying to share with us, because I know that anytime I've had to email my boys' teachers, they've always been, we don't want this to happen. We'll take care of it. And my boys go to public school. So it's in that area that they're like, we don't want to deal with this. So she let the assistant principal know right away. And he's like, we have cameras all over the school. We can figure. She goes, how do you want me to handle this? Do you want it to be, you're not allowed to see Connor ever again? Or do you want it to be, hey, we've seen on the cameras that these things are happening, or other people have talked to us, and whatever. I said, well, I believe Connor still wants to be friends with this kid. He just wants him to back down, like knock it off. And so Friday went fine. He goes to school yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, goes to school Monday. Monday's fine. Goes to school yesterday, comes home. We have an issue again. This kid's pulling on his backpack, putting his arm around him, and I don't want to say choking him, but roughhousing. And like that is probably, I feel bad for my boys because that is probably one of my biggest pet peeves is touching people. Like if you, sorry, my phone just rang. If you have, yes, if you have no good reason to be touching somebody, don't be, because that's how you get yourself in trouble. Because if someone can say to you, Connor just doesn't touch people, he would never do that. That's where we're at. So he ends up telling the teacher again that he hasn't stopped. It's not, it's still going on. There's a couple other boys that are like, hey, this is still happening to me. We need to do something about it. So today, the assistant principal gets involved. And so now it's, what are you doing and why are you doing it? Well, I get a call from the assistant principal and he's like, I had a conversation with everybody. And we've talked about, you're not allowed to, figure out, or you're not, what was I gonna say? We're not, we went through and we're just trying to figure out like what's happening and where is it, and everybody needs to just settle down. And then come to find out, he goes, just so you know, Connor admitted to me that he put the boy in the chokehold after this kid like pushed on him. And I was like, all right, well, that's not exactly how I meant this to go. But I said, I'll have a conversation with him because that's not okay either. But I said, he has been showing that he's super frustrated and is like, I am ready to punch this kid. And I'm like, well, you can't punch him. Let's not do that. Um, but overall, I've been really pleased by the way that the school has responded. Connor came home last night and said something like, this boy keeps saying that things at home are funny. And so I don't know. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything, but I forwarded that to the teacher and said, hey, just so you know, this also could be happening. I don't know what happened over break. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden something changed with this kid and now he's doing these things. So really, I mean, for me, it was not only do you have to pay attention to what your kids are doing because they're off. Things are funny. What is going on? You hear the little word because they're never just going to come out and be like, so this is happening to me at school and I'm really nervous and I don't know what to do.
No.
They don't talk like that. So we have to decipher what all of this means, but then we have to act. We have to be there and be like, all right, I understand that this is a really hard place for you to be. It's my job to help you navigate through this. And to like sit back and not do anything is just as harmful as not paying attention to your kids at all. And so and we're still in the middle of it all. We're still trying to figure out who's going to do what and what's happening. But I'm excited because we've gotten in such a place that at least they feel comfortable telling me what's going on and knowing that I will step in to help.
And that's what's important too with that whole situation is you also didn't break his trust. You had the conversation of saying, I hear you, I understand, but at the same time, I notify somebody else so then they're aware. Because if it's not happening to you, it can happen to so many other kids on campus. So that's one important thing too, is like we often talk about on our podcast is also remembering, especially with us, we have to always remember because we're always like usually in advocacy mode, like, hey, listen, as a parent first, and not breaking our kids' trust. And I have other comments in here in regards to ALA and their kids going to that campus. And as far as before we go into the conversation of healthy versus unhealthy relationships and attachments, one thing I will speak to, and again, for disclaimer purposes for social media, this is for educational awareness purposes only based on my experience with my daughter. So as far as ALA, and even with Becky sharing her kids' experience and her experience with the school that they're at, I've seen both sides of it. I've seen where, especially at ALA, my daughter, based on our experience and my opinion, it's very
Yeah.
cult-like there. my
Yes.
daughter went down she's a sports athlete, student athlete, and she went down a very dark journey down at that campus at Gilbert in the 202. And it went from very dark depression, suicide, and I had to call the cops on my own kid because literally it turned to where she was rebelling, the kids that she was hanging out with, and unhealthy attachments. And all of it started off of this device because I would not give her a phone due to previously media and her doing things on social media and creating accounts without parent permission, bypassing very transparent. So I use my social media, or I use my phone and I allow her to use it. And so she got into my phone and she knew my passwords, took off all the parent controls, all the safety blocks, and ended up allowing her from her own device to go back in and download apps like Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok. And so, and we advocate on behalf of mental health, digital safety, all of these topics. She listens to our podcast. It was on her iPod and all of her devices. And so she was given a burner phone at that campus from another friend. And there was a lot of bullying going around, and she's now 14. And so this would have been when she was a seventh grader there.
And
And
was it just last year? Eighth grade.
Seventh and eighth grade. But she got in trouble around seventh grade.
That's right. That's right.
But ALA, it would have been at eighth grade. And so she she got in a lot of trouble there, and it started seeing after sports her grades went down, and immediate red flags. So there's a lot of red flags that parents have to pay attention to, especially when it comes to the emotional health of your kid. Are they going to isolation, the attitude, and the change of appetite, just different little things, knowing who their friends are. And so a lot of it started because I wouldn't give her technology and knew that she couldn't even manage what was in front of her, let alone a device and all the bullying and social media. So caused to rebellion and had to get the cops involved in calling on my own kid due to the atmosphere at that school. I've walked into that campus plenty of times where it took me getting a notice saying that my daughter had missed so many classes and had so many tardies. And I'm like, how? I'm not bringing her late. What is going on? How is she's in your custody. How is she have so many tardies this class to this class? What is going on? So it really takes the parents being present and really staying on the teachers, on the school administrators. And so I walked into that campus so many times and reported
Guns
things.
blazing.
Yeah, literally. I've reported at that campus vaping in the bathrooms, underage drinking in the bathrooms, TikTok going on during school hours. Like, where is the security? What is going on this campus? So me personally, based off of my experience, I won't say allegedly because it is based off of my opinion and my experience of what my kid went through at that campus. So again, I've seen that side where administration didn't do anything. I've seen where there was multiple conversations of kids and reporting bullying and sexual assault. And allegedly, after we left, there was a lawsuit on the campus with multiple students where sexual assault was brought to the school's attention. And I will say allegedly, based on what we got told after we left that campus, it took me pulling her out of that campus, one because of grades, but I no longer trusted that campus with my daughter and the friend group. And so from there, we later found out that allegedly there was a lawsuit with multiple students and they all got put on NDAs. And apparently it was very, very hush hush. But I've yet to find any documents or anything on it because, again, it is very hush hush. So that's the only part that I will say alleged to on that campus and what we experienced. Now, when it comes to other schools, I've seen where my daughter has also been on the other side where I've gone to the school and I've reported things as such as bullying, but it also, like Becky's situation where when she reported it, but then they came back and said, well, your kid did admit to doing this, this, and this. I've been in that situation too, where it's gotten built up to the point where I'm like, I know my daughter's not perfect, but use her as an example.
Right.
If you need to make her pick up trash, or because she's always gotten in trouble for being very vocal, but she won't be disrespectful
I have
until
no idea where that came from.
she won't be disrespectful and she's someone constantly touching her, constantly like pushing her, bullying her, to where I've taught her to defend herself, report it after this many times, and then I'll go in, I'll confront, say something, but at the same time, like if it's self-defense and you're in that situation, like, and you've reported it multiple times, like I don't, I do not incite any violence or any of that. But at the same time, if it gets to the point of self-defense, reported yourself so many times, like to somebody, to an adult, like that's where we've had that conversation too. So I've seen both sides from the schools, and my daughter is in charter schools. So again, it also goes back to the conversation we wanted to have was healthy and unhealthy relationships as well as attachments. So that is, hold on, let's read this. Do they have phones now? My son has never had
Good.
one.
Keep it that way. Both mine do.
My daughter does not have technology still till this day. As far as say that, let me rephrase that. My daughter uses technology. She doesn't have her own cell phone. So she has an iPad that she rarely uses, but again, it all has digital safety on it. But I do not allow a cell phone.
Both my boys have cell phones. They will continue to have cell phones. They do not have social media. And so that is the big thing. My older son is in the band. He's all over the town with that. And so I need to make sure I know where he is and what he's doing. So I will never, go again. I will never tell people to take away their kids' phones. They need to be very aware of it. We are in this fight regularly. So we see, like, I'll see articles that say, hey, some kid was abducted because they played Roblox and started talking to someone. The biggest thing that I do is every single morning I will take my son's phone, I will unlock it, I'll read whatever text messages came up overnight, any information I need to know about school, and we'll sit and talk about it in the morning and say, what does this mean? Why is this happening? Both of them know that I have absolute access to their phones at all times. I have taken it away. If you start to have an attitude with me because you've been watching too much YouTube nonsense, then you lose your phone for a week and you have to be on detox and you're bored. That's the way that it is. So, but one thing I want to speak about that, which was really interesting, was my older son forgot his phone and I needed him to have it so I knew when he was done with band. And I said, I didn't even bother him. I just set it in his backpack and left. And he came back and he told me that night that one of his friends looked at him and said, you trust your mom with your phone? And I was like, herein lies the problem with all things. Yeah. That phone actually belongs to me. I trust you with my phone, not the other way around. So if you want to continue using this phone, you will do as I say, and I will be able to look at it at any time. I said, but that's the problem, is that we have this world where parents think, well, that's their property. Hell, it is. That belongs to me. I pay the bill. I don't need to check every single text message you ever send, but it belongs to me. And he actually came up to me that night and said, thank you for letting me use your phone. And I said, thank you for being trustworthy enough to allow me for you to use my phone. And that's the situation that we have. Like, that phone belongs to me. And at any point you want to disrespect me, you will no longer have that phone. because it's mine. And so, yes, yes. And they're minors. Absolutely. Absolutely. But too many parents are like, oh, that's their private space. I don't want to get involved. I also have Bark on their phones. I don't know how many times I've had conversations about what, and even their friends. Like most of the time, my boys aren't saying anything that flags Bark, but it will, their friends will. And so there was a big conversation. Everyone was out there saying the N word. And I was like, why is this now a thing that we're talking about that ends up someone told on them and they all got in trouble? Thank God that's not what they need to be saying. But it's stuff like that, that like, if you're not going if you're not going to police your friends and what they're saying and how they're talking, then I will be stepping in to make sure that that happens, because this is not okay. And it's now forever digital, what you're saying and what you're doing. So we are, Bridget and I are very much the exceptions to the rule on technology and being aware and in their space and in their privacy, because we don't care about that.
Yeah, with that too, we also talk a lot about digital safety. So we talk about, uh, again, like for Becky and I, we talk about exactly social media, teaching them for sure. There's a lot of grooming going on.
Crazy.
Yeah. So with that, the children don't know how to interact face to face, and a lot of sexual conversations, especially amongst the youth, happen via text message apps like Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. There's a lot of conversations that go on in the private apps, especially Snapchat. As we're seeing everything unfold in the East Valley, Bark is not actually allowed, because of Snapchat, to have access to monitor those apps for the kids. So we often talk about digital safety and protecting your child's footprint. So with that, we don't believe in the fear of social media. We don't believe in, wrapping our kids up in a bubble. Instead, we believe in empowering the youth and empowering our children of knowing what the signs are of human trafficking and knowing what's going on in not only our schools, but in the community in general. So we have these open conversations, especially everything going on with the Preston Lord case and the Gilbert
Yep.
Goons. It has been mind blowing to hear, especially this week, conversations that has come out from the youth. Just us being around a lot of the youth in advocacy events this past week, and there was one specific night where it was a teen night, and reading the prayer wall amongst the youth was probably the most heartbreaking thing as a parent and as an advocate, and knowing how deep these these connections can go, if not already there, and the public is just now becoming aware based on the level of advocacy we do and the red flags that we're seeing and what's happening in a lot of these cases. And so seeing the youth talk about the number one stress prayer right now was a lot of school stress, the teen violence, the bullying, wishing that their parents had a relationship with God, finding out their identity, and
Someone had an addiction they were struggling with as a teenage girl. Oh, it was heartbreaking.
yeah, a lot of addiction that I heard about, even just having conversations. And as many teens are now realizing and putting faces and people together, seeing people get arrested on campuses that once were on their campus, and hearing different conversations of, oh my gosh, I know so and so because they used to buy from this person.
Yep.
And trying to really empower the youth, as a lot of them wouldn't share names, but trying to empower the youth of, one, healthy friendships, as well as gaining the courage to come forth and share any information that they know. Or if one of their friends were sexually assaulted, if they would again, be there as a friend, but also tell a trusted adult figure to turn that over. So a lot of things, and another thing I wanted to talk about is weed, as well as the vapes that are laced with fentanyl. A lot of the kids on the street knew, and word on the street was to stop buying these vapes from certain individuals because they were laced with fentanyl. So they found a new distributor. And so, again, a lot of these conversations and rumor mill is surfacing around the community. And so it's been very interesting to see, and sitting back and talking to Becky, is a lot of these kids, one, are fear of retaliation.
Yep.
But also the fear of this device, what is in this device, that a lot of the parents do not know. The parents do not know their children, as far as if they are smoking weed, if they are popping pills, if they are possibly had a vape that was at one point laced with fentanyl, or purchased from one of these people that are now on news headlines or in the community that have yet to be brought to light. So even having those conversations as parents, of knowing that as hard as these conversations are, you can't react to your kid if they come and tell you, hey, I was at a party, I was drinking, I was smoking, I vaped at one point, or this is what I know. Parents have to be ready to openly accept that information from their child. And that is what we're seeing. A lot of the youth is so fearful right now, not only because they're realizing how big these cases are and the charges amongst maybe their once friends or classmates or whatever it may be, but also they have to sit back and say, my parents don't even know. They aren't even going to, I don't know how they're going to react to me when I say, hey, I was smoking weed, I was at a party, I lied to you, and different forms of betrayal and trust. So that's another conversation.
And even just the overall feeling of these kids, of this, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying like lack of trust or mistrust, but like this unsure thing with adults in general. Like, we haven't been able to trust you guys to fix this stuff, and it's been going on for years and years and years. And now I almost feel like the floodgates are opening, that now that they know that there are parents out there listening, or adults out there listening, and like, we understand what's happening. And what, like, we were talking to your niece the other day, and she's like, I know so and so who knows so and so who did this. And like, it almost felt like she was relieved to have a conversation. Not that she didn't do anything wrong. She just knew these people. And it's like, I finally have a safe space to say, I know that these people, I know where these people are. They go to my school, or I'm afraid of what they can do. Or, like, there was never that safe space to say, someone come help us, because this is happening and nobody's paying attention.
And on that note, is these kids have reported things to adults, including school, because there's been bullying on campus in different situations amongst the community, in the community, or previous locations where there was multiple people gathered, and the cops are aware. And so seeing that, one thing for me as an adult is living close to downtown Gilbert. So many people in our community know that the youth hang out at the top of these parking garages downtown Gilbert. From the drag racing that goes on up there, from the smoking the weed, the vapes, to taking sexual pictures up there, to all the nonsense that goes up there. I don't let my daughter go up there, and I flat out tell her no, because this is what's going on there, this, and this. The police, Gilbert police, sit at the bottom and go surface up to the top. There's so many cameras, so many cameras. amongst these parking garages. So why we're putting it on the youth to come forward is beyond me with the amount of technology there is in the community. So knowing that all of this is going on and we're putting it on digital forensics and technology is beyond me, but I am grateful that this has brought the community together. It's beyond tragic that it took the death of Preston Lord, but then there's also Jameer Jenkins. There's also Haley Stevens' case. There's also Jeremiah Avelis. And all of those cases where there are teen violence and so many others, as well as all the assaults that we're now seeing come forth. And even previously, they reported it to the police and the cases were closed. So there's so many situations where prevention is key, and had everyone done their job prior, Preston Lord would still be alive today.
Well, and most of those kids would be. And Janine, you're lucky you know now don't live here, but the one thing that it's really crazy, but I would say, in as crazy and horrible as all of this has become and wild, because Gilbert is the second safest city to live in, and we now find out they kept it that way for a reason. Like, we didn't do anything or arrest anybody so we could have that title. It's not the coolest, and I don't mean it to be like disrespectful, but the coolest thing about this is the amount of people who have come forward in support of this family, in support of each other, in support of these teens has been amazing. Like, not, it really is. It's like, not in our town. We didn't know it was happening. We didn't know this was going on. We are saddened and horrified that we allowed it to happen, but not anymore. Like, people are on the alert. We have stuff all the time where, like, their messages like, oh, I saw some kids driving suspiciously down blah blah blah, and it could be nothing, but everybody is on alert as to anybody who is going to be doing stuff. Like, no more. We are done, and we are holding all of the town's council, police, school boards accountable for everything. Like, you're not speaking out, you're probably on the chopping block. You're not doing something, you're probably on the chopping block. Like, we're done being the quiet town that we just thought everything was okay. We found out it wasn't. And so everybody is really, like, coming together. It's awesome.
Absolutely. Especially as much as there's so much dark, seeing how the community has added that with the light. As far as even the rock painting and coming together to spread awareness for not only Preston Lord, but as well as for teen violence in general, and having conversations with their kids. One thing that, it's a double-edged sword. I'm heartbroken for the family, especially as more comes to light and seeing how many steps were missed and how many situations where this should have been stopped and held these kids accountable. And now that these kids are now being held accountable, these kids are having to face so many charges at one time. So again, I'm going to put that back. I'm not dismissing what these kids did, but also the family, money, power, resources.
Yep.
And the accountability, lack of accountability from law enforcement, the schools, from the parenting, protecting the children, everything. But it has opened up a conversation amongst not only the families, but it's opened a conversation amongst the youth with their own parents. Mm-hmm. That is one thing that has to happen, because a lot of these kids, they're going through depression. There's a lot of teens suffering in silence. Yep. And suicide numbers have skyrocketed, especially since the pandemic. And we often talk about social media. And again, we know all the stats from the advocacy side and from the human trafficking piece that we often talk about, but many parents are struggling with how to wrap their brains around these conversations, especially when it comes to even hearing, as we talked about at the walk we were just at this weekend for human trafficking awareness and prevention, many parents don't realize, they just hear the words human trafficking and they automatically think sex, but they don't realize that this can also tie anything that's tied to force, fraud, and coercion, which also there's many forms of human trafficking. We are seeing in a lot of these cases drugs, weapons. The question of every single parent right now should be, where are they getting the drugs from? Who is distributing the weapons? How do they have open access to all of the drugs and the weapons?
Yep.
And so that is another conversation piece, but also knowing who your kids' friends are, where they're hanging out. And these kids have it figured out where their phone can show that they're at this one location, and the parents think their phone's sitting here and they're really out in the desert or in a whole different area at a party. So knowing how to have the conversation of not losing your child's trust with the devices, but really empowering them and building social media contracts. Even the phone devices, as we often talk about, is having that family contract of, if you attitude, grades, whatever your family decision is for discipline, and you and your child signing that contract. And then even apps like Becky and I will preach, as this is not a paid ambassador comment, is Bark. If you do not know about Bark, Katie McPherson talks about Bark all the time. And also knowing what your kids are talking about, especially with the emojis. Kids don't really talk. They use slang and they use emojis or bitmojis. So knowing what the bitmojis mean and knowing how to have these conversations with not only your kids, also so their friends know that if they do need someone to come to, you're there for them as well.
Well, and that's something that I talk to my boys about all the time. Like, that doesn't, if you do something wrong, it doesn't mean that you're off the hook because I'm not going to be mean. You're absolutely going to be held accountable to what it is, but we will work out and get through whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest things as well, like we talked about human trafficking, but the other side of that is exploitation. Yep. And Gen Z is the highest self-exploited generation. Let me repeat that. Self-exploited. They go onto the internet and exploit themselves for money when nobody is making them do that. Some of the biggest issues are, look at yourself as the parent. Are you posting on social media for likes and follows and yeehaw and all that sort of stuff? Are you using your kid for likes and follows and all that sort of stuff? Their value, your value, is in what someone you've never even met thinks about your stuff.
Yeah.
Their value is now in what somebody else thinks about their stuff. And so it's very easy because we always need a something. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need the lowest level. You need food and shelter. In Gilbert, Queen Creek, all that area, very many of us have that piece. What we're missing is that love and attachment. Are you connected with your kids enough that they're not going to find it somewhere else? Now, again, teenage years, everything's going crazy. One day you're good with your kids, the next day they're crying and think that you're awful. So, I mean, it is what it is. But are you as close as you can be with your kids at all times that you can understand the changes, that you know that if somebody were to just find that one little piece that they can sneak in. Like, we were just at a documentary, we're at a movie the other night, and this girl posted like, oh, I wish my mom knew me better, or why does she always have to cancel on me, or something. I don't remember what the caption was. And this guy snuck into her DMs, was talking to her. I hate when my parents do that too. And spent 3, 4, 5 months grooming this girl. Like, these people are patient.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll act like your friends. And if you're really good, they'll get, if they are really good, they'll get you as the parent involved too. So now we have people that are known as tricky people, coaches, teachers, pastors, high level people you would never guess, because guess what? That coach really, really thinks that Johnny can do a great job. And if you just let him have a little bit more time with me, I'll make sure that he's good. So mom and dad leave. Guess what happens to Johnny? Does that happen all the time? No, of course it doesn't happen all the time. But it happens. And again, if we're not that safe space for our kids to fall and they say, I don't want to go to practice anymore, and you go, oh, it's fine, it's good. Something happened. You missed the opportunity for your kid to find out what's going on because you like that groomer groomed you to thinking that they're an okay person. Everybody, I never live in this world like everybody's a bad person, but at any time a good person can become a bad person. That's the world that I live in because I know too often these things have happened. And so I've told my boys, if at any point you're at practice and you don't like it, we are done immediately. If you tell me somebody did something, I don't care if I like that person or not, we're done immediately. Those are the conversations that we need to have, but that's a internal, that's a parent conversation, that's a self-reflection, and that's where we really need to start in this world. Is as parents, we need to settle ourselves down. If we're screaming and yelling over really small things, when are they ever going to come to us for the big stuff? They're not.
Absolutely. And going off of that too is the average age that a kid is watching porn is 8 years old. And so again, and Gen Z is the most trafficked generation as due to self-exploitation, and the cell phone is literally the new pimp.
And to put that into perspective, that's second and third grade.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be doing that. Yes, really. That they shouldn't be doing anything related to that. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there was a guy who he goes to all different schools in the Midwest, and he was at a school and had a whole bunch of kids come up to him that would talk about, I sent naked pictures of somebody that I don't know. They were 10. I recorded myself and my girlfriend having sex while I strangled her. By the way, he was in 8th grade. She was in 6th grade. It's a whole different conversation we need to have, but that's where we are. And then I think he posted it or did something with it. And within less than 24 hours, 11 grown adults were asking him to make more and that they would pay him.
Yeah.
This is the world we're living in. So if we're thinking that we just need to coddle our kids and keep them home and give them big hugs, it's not that either. We've got to get our heads out of the sand because our kids are hurting, and they're hurting really, really, really young. Some kid was in, I want to say was in like the 11, 12, 13-year-old range, racked up $18,000 on his dad's credit card because the person that he was playing with on Roblox said that if you don't give me money, I'm going to come and find out where you are, because guess what? His location was on Roblox. So now they know where he is. All you have to do is a search of that kid's name. More than likely you'll find the parents, and now you know all of the pieces and all of that stuff. Make sure your stuff's private when you're on social media, unless it's an open, unrelated forum.
Yeah, and going with that conversation is one podcast that we have is Smith Alley.
Yes.
And he talks about his porn addiction and social media and what to him. And he talks about it from his perspective as a teenager, and how having that conversation not only with the addiction to porn, how he overcame that and then became a positive and a role model on his campus to help other teammates and help other schools, as well as now goes around in ministry and amongst the youth to empower and talk about addiction and suicide, as he lost some friends to suicide. So there's a podcast on at Save Our Children podcast on all platforms with that conversation. We also have a lot of the drug trafficking conversation piece and exploitation all throughout our podcast. But when it comes to, there's a podcast on there with Sheriff Lamb as well as Jaco Booyens on mental health and the underbelly of social media and TikTok with Katie, Ray, and Whitney. That is them exposing Whitney as a content moderator for TikTok and what was being used on those platforms, and her turning all this CSAM and CSEM, for those who don't know, that's child sexual exploitation material and child sexual abuse material, over to the FBI. So that podcast, as she was a whistleblower, is on our page as well. But it has changed a lot with the power of social media. So also just remembering as an adult, taking a step back and saying, how am I using this technology? And how am I putting my kids in danger and not protecting their digital footprint by posting open pictures on these public platforms, especially, you guys, as sick as this sounds, you would never imagine the number of photos that are scrubbed off of social media without your knowledge and put on the dark web of children in their swimsuits or their newborn pictures and sold on the dark web for a lot of money. So again, also remembering that, unfortunately, and as sick and disturbing as this sounds, people do this every single day, and we're giving them the content to go and exploit your own children without your knowledge because you're uploading these images to social media. And some parents are also TikToking or posting things on social media for social media clout, likes, and following, to build following and to profit. The minute he profits off a minor and exploits them, that again ties to human trafficking, child exploitation. So our, yeah, we can share the link. Also, all of our podcasts, everything is in our bios. So if you click on the link in our bios or go to our website at standbysurvivors.com, Save Our Children podcast, everything is linked there for all platforms. But even to talking about digital safety and the digital footprint and protecting your child, is just remembering too that the pimps literally have it so much easier, and they just sit on social media and they can easily connect the child's school and location based off of what we're posting. Yep. So remember and be mindful of what you're posting of your child and what information you're giving out, especially like those back to school boards that people post of what their child likes, who the teacher is, what school they're at, what grade they're in, the sports they're in. You're literally giving all of that and serving it to a pimp and all the predatory behavior that these predators need. You're serving it to them on a platter.
Yeah, I just posted something today. I don't even know where. I don't know if Jeff said it this weekend. Maybe that's where I got it. But 10% of all human trafficking exploitation things are someone being actually stolen. 90% come off of online. So the problem is that your teenage daughter, who's now really mad at you about something, posts something in the social media she's allowed to have with no guardrails or nothing. Someone finally is like, oh, I got her, reaches out, hey, let's be friends, let's talk. Yes, I'm also a 15-year-old boy, but I go to a neighboring school, but blah, 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 all these things. And they sit and this is what they do all day, is they're talking to your daughter, they're talking to this other girl, they're talking to this boy over here pretending to be a girl, and they just swirl it around. And so then when they say, oh my gosh, finally you can come in, let's meet or let's go wherever, all of a sudden they're just gone. And I know I've told this story a few times before. I'm going to tell it again with the girl in, I think it was Oklahoma. I think, yeah, she was at Oklahoma City basketball game. And she begged and begged and begged her dad to take her to this game because her online boyfriend was also going to be at the game. Dad didn't know that the online boyfriend was going to be there, but cool. It's a great time to hang out with his daughter. They go to the game. The daughter says, okay, I'm just going to go to the bathroom. So she's going to go meet her boyfriend. The guy is in the bathroom, injects her with heroin, takes her out the back door, and she's missing for 10 days. The only reason that she's found back is because they forgot to put a filter on her face before they put her Craigslist ad out for all of the people looking for sex. So for 10 days, she was raped repeatedly in a hotel room. And the only reason that she got back was by the grace of God, because they made a mistake and the FBI was able to filter and find her. This is what we're dealing with as parents. So we've got to make sure our kids are safe. We've got, if it's going to be hard, we're at a point where you almost can't go back on what we've done because our kids are so used to being stuck on social media. They're so used to the way that they do things. If we start taking things away, then they're only going to start lying. They're going to start doing things behind our back and doing stuff. So it's now a matter of we have to be as extremely transparent as we can while also making a connection with them so that we can make sure we're putting these pieces together. As we all were teens, we don't ever think anything's going to happen to us. We're invincible and it's never going to happen to me and all the things. But even if that is the case, that it never happens to your kid, if they are aware, if they are aware, they can help their friends. And that's why we inform our kids, because it may never happen to them, but it certainly could happen to their friends.
Do you guys think it would be appropriate to watch this live with my 17-year-old daughter? I don't think we said anything out of the ordinary or
That's really out of the ordinary for us. No.
Out of the ordinary. I don't know, based on these conversations and what you're having at home. But for us, like, these are conversations that we have with our kids every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, no. We also try to be very mindful when having these conversations, especially on platforms, but at the same time, we don't sugarcoat it because we also know that children do listen and watch our content. So we are also mindful of that, but we also know a lot of people are just waking up to this and realizing the different forms of human trafficking and things going on in their community, and it's a lot to comprehend. So give yourself grace as well as a parenting, as parents are.
I for surely don't want to be responsible for getting you in trouble with her mom after having her watch, but I don't think it's inappropriate for you to have her watch. I think that as long as my caveat would be as long as you're sitting next to her and having conversations, pause, like show it, pause it. Do you understand what that means? Does this make sense to you? Here's how this could impact you. Just sending in saying, watch it, I think leaves a really big gap. But I think being super transparent with our kids is important. Age appropriate transparency. That goes all the way down into body safety, and making sure that we're using the correct terminology, and that we, like, my older son has been, like, my degree is in biology, so I have no problem saying anything about anything. I know how it works, I know why it works, I know the purpose, all the stuff. And so we've always had those conversations to the point where he just, like, he thinks it's funny at almost 16 to be running around here naked doing whatever, embarrasses his brother and to all get out, and that's partially why he does it. But that's the sort of, like, transparency that we've had, is this is how life is, this is where we are, this is the dangers of life. Mm-hmm. It's actually why we started our podcast. To be honest, 2 years ago when we started it, we didn't know where to go. We were like, do we wrap our kids in bubble wrap? Do we scream at the world? What do we do? And we kind of landed on, we do all of those things. We have to yell at the world to make it a safer, better place. We've got to wrap our kids in bubble wrap occasionally when they don't need to be part of these things. They don't need to have these conversations. But then in that gap, we've got to teach them. Why? I'm not just going to take your phone away. Here's why I am doing that. Because if you stare at YouTube too long, you have such dopamine hits that nothing else in your brain, YouTube or social media, whatever, nothing in your world makes you happy. As your parent, I have to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm going to remove this device that I know is causing you problems, even though you don't know it, so that you can go find something different. Are they mad? Absolutely. But I gave them a reason.
The why is important, especially even talking, as I often talk about on the podcast, is the music. I do lyric
Yeah.
breakdown. So I don't listen to Doja Cat, Meg Stallion, a lot of secular music. I do not allow if it ties to drugs, sex, violence, any of that aspect. Does she listen to it when she's with friends or around certain people? Absolutely. Teens do it. It happens. Do I, my nieces, my nephews, my daughter knows that that music isn't allowed in my car on my, if they take over the aux, not playing on my speakers. So just also knowing the why. And so with that, I do lyric breakdown. I do the explicit lyric breakdown.
Yes,
And
she does.
you know that even though you hear this on the radio and this is what you're hearing, this is what this means. This is what they're saying and doing. What do you need to know as a 14-year-old female about getting choked and getting things stuck in you and being used in a train and all of those conversations. So based on the lyrics, I do a very deep lyric kid a friendly and age appropriate conversation of the lyric breakdown, but we have those real conversations. Again, like he said, the kids aren't stupid. So you have to keep it real with them. And so even her friends will hear me sometimes, like they'll hear and try to put certain songs on. They all know like that music's not allowed on in my car. And so there's different conversations too that us as adults that we can have with our kids, like based on morals and values and what we allow our own household, that can happen like today, like, and bringing dinner back to the table, and even just having that family time and unplugging from social media, having screen time and having those limits, and knowing who your kids are gaming with, knowing the gamer tags. I will pop in as, especially recently, Fortnite was, and
Back
Xbox
again. Mm-hmm.
is now our house. Not my favorite thing, but does my daughter play it with her friends here and there? Yes, especially as she was injured. But I'm also popping in on the conversation and I'm like, who are you talking to? And then I know the friends' usernames, and I turned off the chat features, and I'll sometimes pick up the headset because they'll say, oh, hi, Miss Vega, or tell your mom I said hi. So I'll talk to the kids on the little headset. But the kids all know that I'm present and I'm listening in conversations. If they're cussing, they'll be like, why are you cussing? Her mom's listening. So like they all know that, especially with my daughter, that like somebody, an adult is usually around her, and that we're engaged in knowing what she's doing. So another thing too would be it's in the link in our bio, but I'll also post it on my story, is there is the movie 8 Days with Jaco Booyens, and that is a great movie to watch. Adults, I would say, watch it
Yep.
first before deciding you want your teenager to watch it. But it is about a high school student who goes to a party, goes with her friends, and essentially she is drinking and being a teen, and she is, I don't want to ruin it actually. You'll just have to watch the trailer, but it is 8 days.
It's very, it'll hit home because the mom is very aware of what's going on, doesn't let anything happen, and the daughter wasn't necessarily schooled right, and it could just happen to any of us, is kind of the thing. What is a good hobby for a 13-year-old boy? Depends on what they're into. I have one son. My 13-year-old is big into baseball. He's actually part of a Christian baseball club that they go around. It's just baseball. Obviously you live here, it's big down here. My other son is in the band, so he does a lot of the different band stuff. So kind of depends on what they're into, where we go. But I do know that there are some good organizations for many things around.
And if you're local to Arizona and need different resources, definitely message us. We will respond, or click the links in our bios. Like, there's a lot of information in there. If not, we can get you resources. But again, I would say going off of what to get your kid involved with too, that goes based off of their likes, and really empower them based on what they like, and find different outlets for your kid, especially if there is signs of depression or like the isolation. Even just going on a family walk, maybe even painting rocks and writing different sayings and positive affirmations. That might be a start. Who knows? They might be into art. But even just then taking those rocks on your family walk and leaving them around the valley, and not only are you bringing awareness to teen violence, but also you're having that bonding time with your child, and you're outdoors. So getting them off of social media and doing little things as a community, or bike riding. There we go. We ride bikes a lot. Taking a bike ride, and on the bikes, go and place rocks, or, just getting out with your children and making sure that they know that you're present. That is key. And sometimes it's not even having the right words, because we don't have it all together. We aren't the perfect
We
parents.
look like we know what we're doing, but we really don't.
If you listen to our podcast, we've brought you guys along like the journey from tears to smiles to all the ups and downs. It's all on our platform. So we're very transparent. Our kids are even on our podcast, and there's episodes with our kids and talking about emotions and what the word anxiety even means. Are you saying that because it's a trend and that's what all your friends are saying, or is something really going on? And let's get to the root of it. And even journaling, letting your kid pick out that journal or the art supplies, and giving the power back to your child, and respecting their boundaries as well, and building that trust amongst them. So really just empowering your kid versus just like being so controlling, but also they do know that they're going to be held accountable if there is disrespect, or they did do something wrong. There is disciplinary action that's going to happen as well.
Yep. I want to go back to the things that you can do, but I want to say, Janine, thank you if you're still on. I miss you. She's my church buddy. We will probably, this will be posted on our social media on Instagram again, but then also I believe we're just going to make it into a podcast. So if you don't want to see us, you just want to listen, it'll be on Save Our Children. You can look that up in any of the podcast places. It's also on it'll be on YouTube. The video, I believe, will go up depending on if we're in YouTube jail or not, because we say things people don't like. So there's that. Going back to the idea of like, what can you do? I think back, and this is maybe like the change in thought process of how we were raised and how like our parents were raised, is this idea that you have to, from high school, you have to go to college, and from college, you have to get a job. I know that the job I currently have didn't even exist when I was in college. It wasn't a thing. Like, you couldn't go to school for it. And so is that still the way we need to go? Starting to really expand. Like I've talked to my older son, and he's really into percussion. He's really into music. He loves the band. He loves marching. And so if you could have all of the money in the world, what would you do? And his answer was, I would start a music store. Okay, so how do we start a music store? Like, maybe you go to college for a little bit to play in the band, but maybe your degree's in business. Maybe you don't finish a degree. I don't know. But how do you fuel their passion to become their life? Will that work? Will that be forever what he does? I have no idea. He's 15 and a half. Like, but really making sure that we don't, it's hard enough to be an adult, we don't need you to be an adult at 15. And so to be able to be like, what are you going to do when you grow up? Who cares? I don't want you to know what you're going to do till you're like 25. Enjoy your life. We'll figure it out. If you're still living with me, I'll probably charge you rent, but that's a totally different situation. And we'll get there, but don't worry about what you're going to do. Right now is all about figuring out what you like and where you want to be and figuring out how you live in this world and how to learn right now how to be an adult. We'll figure out the adult stuff when you're an adult and actually your brain parts are connected, which isn't going to be for like 10 years. So enjoy this. It's not worth being an adult so early.
Well, too, and even hearing that is also empowering your child. So, like, if, for example, music, and that's something he wants to do, okay, look at where you often spend a lot of time at too, and you have connections and resources.
Right.
And he go sit with the worship team at church and go
Yeah.
and what they do and the time and the commitment and see if that's even something that, he enjoys and seeing the behind the scenes. So different things like that, as well as empowering them and what their likes are. And not, I wouldn't say so much like the wrapping them in the bubble, because we have to teach them how to, navigate through certain situations, because when we're not there to help or to protect them, they're going to have to know how to be an adult. And as much as we don't want them to grow up, society has, and the culture has made these kids grow up at such
Too
an
soon.
early age in their life that they're facing so many things as a youth that us as adults never had to navigate through at our own at our lives. As well as, like, even during the whole pandemic, like, they had kids barking at them, they're trying to figure out their sex and what the school and society allows. And so just knowing that even the mental health, and some days they might not want to talk to you, that's fine, don't force them. Sometimes it's just being silent and sitting there with them and knowing that you're present, or giving your child a hug and saying, I love you, and reminding them, like, I'm proud of you, versus just constantly nagging at them, empowering them in a different way as well. And if they're struggling in something, okay, how can we get you support? Is it a tutor? Or if this tutor at school you're not comfortable with, let's see, who do I know that is really good at math in my family, or a friend, or someone that you trust and that they trust, especially that they
Yes.
trust, and are comfortable with even having, like, even being taught math. Because again, some kids might say, oh, well, I'm not good in this, where someone might think that they're really good and they're like this perfect, like, excelling student, and that might be something where you hear about, like, you never. So really just honoring your child, and even if there is different insecurities, like for my daughter, like, she's looks a lot older, but even at the campus when she was at ALA, one thing that we struggled with there was we didn't fit in there, one, culture wise, from religion, but also because of ethnicity. And she didn't look like all the other kids, and so she felt
Way prettier.
she felt she had to change her image, which she didn't need the makeup. She didn't need all of the things that were going on in the campus, but it was an insecurity where she felt I now had to be more grown because of, one, social media, two, because of the surroundings. So makeup, fake eyelashes, all of that in the culture. So knowing how to accept our children and their flaws, but if you see an insecurity and lack of confidence, build that up in them. And so even if it's like writing on, if you have daughters, writing on the mirrors. And I just was at, actually a couple days ago, at one of these at a house for a celebration of life, and on the mirror it had all these Bible scriptures, and it said, like, you are enough, like, you're beautiful, and it had different Bible scriptures underneath it. And I wish I had my phone so I could have taken a picture. But there are so many like different things that teens say in the quotes, but then underneath
Oh,
it was a Bible scripture.
oh.
And so just remembering like those little things, or even putting a note like in their lunch or with them where they'll see it, hiding it to where when it's something that they access in their folder, they see that little note. If they're having a bad day, they see that and they know that they're loved, they're seen, and they're heard. So different little tidbits to add to like us as parents and being there for
Well,
our children.
and and I think a big thing, and sometimes this isn't always easy just because of jobs and different things that have to happen, but even just being there for things. Are you at practices? Are you at games? Are you helping feed food? Are you help? And you have to do it all the time, but that is how you get to see the people they interact with, and that um, their friends or their peers can see you and they know who you are, and that you're there. And so that I think is a big thing. And again, you can't always do it. I know my mom worked full time, and so she couldn't add that to her space or to her plate ever. But things like that, that if you can, that's a really important thing to do.
Absolutely. And I just want to go over really quick before we wrap up is
Yeah.
redlightrebellion.org, and have a bunch of resources for parents as well as they go into the high schools and teach a lot of the prevention and the conversations around human trafficking and healthy relationships. And so, red flags of a pimp: easily jealous, controlling, violent, promises are too good to be true, always knows ways to make a lot of money, flashes money, especially if you see it on social media, vague about their jobs, encourages sexual photos and dancing for money, projects financial responsibility, and demanding about sex. And also do know that this can show up in the form of as pimps pose online or in person as a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a friend, or even in professional aspects, which can also look like influencers, is what we call them nowadays, brand ambassador, modeling, um, and even for the youth, I would say, as we've seen in, especially, I'll say for me, I've seen it in a lot of youth sports, is the child's likeness. So being used for their image, and then they are exploited with product placement. Um, red flags of a victim: an older boyfriend or daddy figure, as we heard that was a trend of being called daddy. Uh, New expensive items, sudden changes in behavior, separation from friends and family, acting out, multiple phones, running away, signs of abuse, tattoos or branded, not free to come and go, fear, anxiety, depression, change in vocabulary, or if you hear words such as the game, the life, wifey, tricks, or the track, those are references to human trafficking as well. And so, again, redlightrebellion.org has different handouts for the parents on how to empower your student, or I'm sorry, your kid and their friends, and be one of the students on campus to really be a leader and take a stance on eradicating human trafficking. And so there's parent conversations as well as handouts on there and little downloads.
I was gonna
Like,
say, I think they have not a book like like e-learning.
yeah. So they have like a whole program on there for parents that and different resources if you're struggling, if your kid is struggling with social media addiction, porn. Not only Red Light Rebellion has resources, but Jaco Booyens Ministry has free resources as well. All of those links are in our, I know for sure in my bio, and then Becky has like the main link to our website, which links it out there as well. So if you need any resources, definitely let us know. But those are some other resources for everyone listening. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot. We covered what we wanted to do. But one of the things I think that is the biggest thing is if we as parents want to see our kids stand up to the injustice of this world, we have to stand up with them. We have to stand up first. And we have to show them that, you know, if you have a bully and you tell me about it, I have to tell you what's going on, or I have to tell the teachers, or I have to tell the officials what's going on. I've had it a couple times with my older son that I've had to email the high school of a poor girl that threatened suicide. I had to email. There was another girl who has an identity as a boy who was going in the boys' bathroom and making all those boys uncomfortable. So I had to step in and tell them that something needs to happen there. And so if we expect them to be strong, we've got to face all of this ourselves and show them what it means to be strong.
He said Preston question.
What
I'm
about
not sure what that reference was to, but as far as I know, a lot of people have said, as far as like all of these kids need to be arrested, absolutely. As hard as this is also to say, as far as the family has been very graceful and waiting for justice and answers, as we see talk about him. Yeah, as far as for Preston, I don't know if a lot of you are new here to follow us, but we are very involved in the community. We go to all of the events for Preston Lord and anything tied to teen violence and the youth. We have 2 podcasts before this live that specifically talk about everything going on with Preston and the Gilbert Goons. So we have 2 podcasts before this as well. Those are on all of our platforms and social media. For us, as far as community standpoint and advocacy standpoint, with all of these cases and the teen violence, it's nothing new, unfortunately, and as heartbreaking as that sounds, as far as seeing the justice for Preston Lord, I don't think that with that case, I know so many people are pressing for answers and want us to talk about it. As far as details and what we know everything that the community knows. And we're seeing it as quick as everybody else. With that situation, personally, my only opinion would be, as far as charges and arrests and why we haven't seen anything, is these cases are being built. So the Gilbert Goons and all of these, one time people to Gilbert Goons so they can make it a gang, and having those charges stick. I will also say, as frustrating as it sounds and is, as we're frustrated ourselves, having the charges stick. And so building each kid's case and
from
tying them.
from 2 years back, things that are now being.
So you see multiple kids now getting cases reopened, and now they're being charged in multiple cases and have multiple cases attached to them. So with that, my personal thought is these teens will not be able to take the plea of first-time offenders or be able to say mental health and use that avenue as an scapegoat. They will be accountable. So that is just my opinion, is these charges are now coming down and there'll be multiple charges being added. And so if they can get all of these charges to stick and hold them accountable with those previous assaults prior to Preston, you will see multiple lawsuits, not only on the kids, but I think that the police in and out and the schools will also be held accountable as we continue to see more come to light. There is so many people, again, that failed the youth. So it is frustrating because so many people have failed the youth in general with all of the assaults and all of the senseless acts of violence in general. So when it comes to the Preston case, again, we will continue to be talking about it and be out in the community. But for us, like, we don't know anything that the public doesn't know.
Yeah. I think the saddest thing for me, and we've talked about this, I'm not at all sad that these folks are getting the justice they deserve. The part that makes me sad is that the parents, the teachers, the community, whoever it is, the first time these kids are getting any sort of consequences is going to be sitting in the middle of a jail cell. And that to me is like, oh, what a waste. We didn't know. I'm not blaming, I want blaming their parents, but I'm not blaming anybody for not doing that. But you get to a point where it's like, I hope that these kids are redeemed in some way. I mean, like to tell their story of why not to do what they did. Because again, it's like, dang, you were not. I mean, then maybe they were kicked out of school, held accountable by their parents, whatever it was, and now you get, this is what your life ended up to be, and you're not even barely an adult.
Yeah. And one thing of seeing all these kids, and it's frustrating to see them be able to get bonded out. That part I can't comprehend, especially when they're an active threat to the community and there's multiple assaults. That part I don't understand. The justice system has always been broken. So, I mean, I have hope in the fact that all the parents are showing up from the community and answers, not only with the town councils, but with the police, the schools, everything, which will help all of these cases see and get. But as far as with the youth in general, I think that the best place to start as a family, as a community, is have these conversations at home. It starts at home with kids. I think a lot of the youth needs to go through drug and alcohol rehabs. There's a lot of addiction amongst the youth in general.
I'm sure their parents as well. Addictive personality is
and I would say not just amongst the kids that are committing the assaults, but kids who are going to these parties and putting themselves in situations, especially student athletes, in situations where they shouldn't even be in the first place. So I think a lot of those conversations go back to home. But again, with the drugs, alcohol, it starts at home. It starts with these conversations that we're currently having, and a lot of people are just now having these conversations amongst their family. So to each's house is their own. But yeah, it is beyond frustrating and very disturbing as more continues to come to light. But I also think that there's a lot more going on that the public can even see. We personally, knowing off the advocacy level and based off of red flags that we see, it's deeper than what everyone can see. So it's going to take time, because being able to connect and navigate to get where the community is here and just now waking up to this, where that goes down a very windy, dark path, and the community has to get up to here at the level that this potentially with all these cases could be at, with all the connections and if there is other corruption or ties, allegedly. Yep. So that I don't know and I won't speak to, because I don't want to spread any false things. But yeah, that's just our thoughts and opinions on all of that. And again, we will continue to be present for the youth and talking about teen violence, as well as, again, tonight, there is actually a teen violence meeting.
there is.
So we'll be present at that. I'll be present at that. I'm a graphic artist. Oh, that's
we just
awesome.
Might.
That is awesome. Thank you for that. But again, we will turn this into a podcast and have it on our page as well. I don't know when Instagram's going to kick us off. We're already past the hour mark.
We're getting really close. Yeah.
To wrap it up before it just drops the whole conversation. But thank you guys for all the love and support, and even joining to have these conversations and sharing like your own situations with your kids as well. Becky, you want to say anything before I go into close?
No, I think again, thank you guys for, as always, supporting us and coming in for the hard conversations, because it's never easy to hear or talk about.
Change Starts with awareness. When does it stop? When each and every single one of us have the courage to stop looking away and turning a blind eye. You don't get to look the other way on this issue. Put down your smart devices and listen to your children, family, or friends. The world is hurting. We have a duty to protect the innocent. If we don't, that blood is on our hands. Everyone has a story. Together, we must rise for the children. It starts with one person. It starts with you. When you say, am I a part of the problem? When you face that mirror and start holding people accountable and start being present. You are not alone. Be bold, be you, be your own kind of beautiful. Stand tall and speak your truth, and the world will adjust. They can't take your voice, and it's never too late to do what's right. We want to take a moment and hold space for those dealing with mental health, adversity in their life, those who are just waking up to this, those who were abused sexually, mentally, domestically, those who had their innocence stolen by the corrupt system, CPS, foster care, and their own family or trusted adult figure, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a loved one, whoever it may be. Please know you are strong. You are beautiful. You are enough. We are sorry for everything you've endured. You have a powerful voice, and we pray that one day God gives you the strength when you're ready to speak your truth and continue to shine your light and be true to who you are. Know that we are here for you and you are not alone. I want to take a moment of silence for teen violence as well as justice for Preston Lord, Jeremiah Jenkins, or I'm sorry, Preston Lord, Jameer Jenkins, Jeremiah Avalis, and Haley Stevens. Enough is enough. Survivors, as always, we hear you, we see you, we stand by you. Sending you love, light, and blessings. Love, Save Our Children podcast.